Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video. Really excited to see everyone back for another one, and especially in our journey in Linux. As we continue our journey in Linux, of course, you have to make sure that you're up to speed to where we are today. So if this is your first time clicking on the channel, or there's some things that you may be watching in this video that you are unsure of how we got here, make sure you check out the description as there's a link to our playlist. And of course, it's our Linux series, so that way you can learn all that you need to know to get you up to this point. Because it's going to be very, very difficult to follow along if you don't have the necessary background. So make sure you check out the description, not only for that playlist, but also as well, we always put all the latest and greatest that's going on with the channel down there. So make sure you check that out. In today's video, we're going to talk all about users and groups in a Linux system. And you're going to learn many topics around that. How to add a user, how to add a group. You're going to learn a little bit about the sudoers file and how that ties back into users and groups. Now there's so many little nuggets that you're going to learn today, so I'm really excited for you guys. But before we jump into today's video, make sure you go ahead and give me a like for the video as it helps the channel grow. Make sure you go ahead and subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications so that way you're notified whenever we upload to the channel. And of course, share the video with a family member or friend, so that way they can learn as well. Keep in mind as you watch the video and as you have any questions, feel free to leave me a comment in the comment section below and I'll be sure to get back to you guys. Speaking about comments, if you guys love the video and it's helping you out, let me know in the comments below. So with housekeeping out of the way, let's jump to the desktop and let's learn all about users and groups in today's video. Hey everyone, welcome back to the desktop. And by now, of course, this is, I hope, a very familiar environment, and I say this in every video. You guys need to go back and take a look at my previous videos because all of our videos built on our previous knowledge. So in today's video, we're going to learn all about users and groups and what they are for, like what is the purpose of that in a Linux system. And so we're going to be building on concepts and ideas that we've learned in the past. So if you are unaware of where we are in today's video in the sense of how we got here, or maybe this is your first time clicking on the channel and watching this video, go ahead and check out the description because I always keep the playlist that will show you all the videos and how to get up until this point. Not only will you find the playlist there, but you'll also see all the latest and greatest about this particular channel. So you'll find anything from updates to a description about what the video is about. Everything is there. Just go in the description, go check it out. And if you have any questions still, leave me a comment in the comment section below. With housekeeping out of the way, let's jump into today's topic. And again, we're going to learn about users and groups and why it's important to have users and groups in a Linux system. So as you guys can see here, my terminal is already up. And you should know how to get the terminal up by now. I mean, that's one of the basic things. I've been covering it in a lot of different videos, but we're going to skip that part. The terminal should be up. And let's jump a little bit into what is a user. So in the Linux world, a user is anyone who can log into the system. Now here's the thing. Each user has a unique username, and that username has an associated user ID, or what we call a UID. Users can be human, like you and I, interacting with the actual computer itself, or it can be a user specifically created for running specific services or applications. And you may be asking yourself, well, what's the point of that? Well, as a quick example, you can take a look at from an automation perspective. Let's say that you want to automate multiple machines that are in your network. You can create a specific user, and let's pretend we call that user automate. Now you can run specific automation tasks and use the automate user in order to run those tasks. So that's a very quick and simple example of why you would have a user that's specifically meant for just running applications and services. And in this particular case, that user is meant for automating tasks. Now, I say this in every video. Of course, learning definitions and all that good jazz, yeah, that's great and all, but we actually want to see something in the terminal, right? I want to actually have some tangible knowledge because right now, definitions are great, but show me something, right? So let's jump into the terminal and let's take a look at an example of a user. And in the first example, and the easiest example that I can give you is I am logged in as myself, which is El Acosta, right? You actually see El Acosta, and El Acosta is logged in into this machine, which is called localhost. And one of the cool things that I can teach you guys when it comes to taking a look at who you are from a user, there's a command called who am I. And when you run that command, you'll see your username. So in this particular case, I am El Acosta. Now there's one other user that I have on this box. And by the way, this user is on every single box. And by box, I mean every single operating system, every Linux operating system, that is. And that other user, of course, is root. And we talked about this before slightly, but root is a user that can do anything on the box. It has permission to do whatever they want. So this user is very, very critical that you protect, meaning you don't want somebody to have access to this user because they can do whatever changes and you have no way of identifying who did what. But in this particular case, let's go ahead and do SU, and that stands for switch user. And we're going to switch the user to root. I'll go ahead and put in my password here. And by the way, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I edit out the password because there is a keylogger that shows you guys what I'm typing. And of course, I don't want to give you out my password. So anyways, guys, after putting my password, I am now root. And if we do the same command again, who am I? You can see that I am root. And with this user, I can run any command that my heart desires on this machine. So let's exit out of root. And we are now El Acosta again. If I do who am I again, you can see, of course, that I'm El Acosta. Okay, great. Those were basic examples of users that are logged into this particular machine. And by the way, you also learned how to switch users in the machine. So keep that in mind. SU is a really cool command. So now there's another thing that I want to show you guys, and it's where you can take a look at the associated ID of a particular user. And if we do a less and we look under the Etsy directory, and there's a file called PASSWD, or password. And if we hit enter on that, you can see here that there is a list. And by the way, let's bring this over a little bit so my head doesn't cover the output. So as you can see here, there is a list of particular users on this box, and they're all listed here. So I can actually go ahead and search for El Acosta, and there you see El Acosta. There is the user. You can also see what my path is for my home directory. You can also see what shell I'm using, so bin bash. You can also see my user ID, which is 1000, and you can also see what my group ID is, which is also 1000. So let's go ahead and get out of this particular file now. Now here's another cool little trick. If you guys are interested in verifying that the user ID or the UID was correct, as you saw in that password file, we can actually use a command called ID. And if we hit enter on this, it actually tells us what our user ID is here. So user ID 1000, El Acosta. And then we also have our group ID, what groups I'm a part of. Very useful information. So there you have it, folks. I mean, it really is that simple. That's all you need to know about user and user IDs. It's interesting. I find that people get very nervous. Maybe they see a command line and think there's a lot more to it than this, but that's all there is about users. So now let's jump into what are groups and how groups are used in Linux. So of course we have to start off with our definition before we jump to the terminal. And a group is nothing more than a collection of users that can share permissions and access files and directories. And by the way, each group has a unique group name and an associated group ID, or what is called a GID. And funny enough, actually, if we go back to the terminal now, we saw that I have a GID of 1000, and that GID of 1000 means that I have a group called El Acosta. So if we actually look at what groups I am a part of, you can see that I'm a part of the 1000, which is El Acosta. I am part of 10, which is Wheel, right? Those are the two groups that I am a part of. And we'll talk a little bit about what 10 is. Now, the best example that I can give you guys about why you would want to have groups, Let's say you are in an organization and you have multiple people that work in that organization. Let's say now that you have a group of individuals who can access a particular file on this machine. What if this group of folks need to access that particular file and they need to be able to write to the file, they need to be able to read the file or execute the file, right? They need to have those permissions. Are you going to individually go and adjust each person's permission for that particular file? That becomes very unmanageable. And the other thing to think about too is when it comes to organizations, people come and go, right? People either get fired, they find a better opportunity, maybe they just leave the industry, or new people get hired and new people need access to this particular file. You can really start to see how adjusting each individual's permissions for that file doesn't make sense. And that's a great example of why we have groups in Linux, because you can just add a particular person to a group. And once you add them to the group, they inherit all the permissions that come with that group. So that's an excellent example of why you have groups in Linux. So jumping into the group aspect like we did with users, there is a file that allows you to see the groups. So let's go ahead and do a less. And let's go into the Etsy directory /Etsy, of course, and then /group. And group is the file that we'll take a look at. And here is a list of the groups. And of course, if I search for 1000 or I can search for Elacosta, both of them are the same in the sense that 1000 represents Elacosta and Elacosta translates to 1000, which is a GID or the group ID. So as you can see there, that is 1000 and it lists my group, which is Elacosta. So this is a cool little way to see what groups are available. And then the other thing that I wanted to show you guys real quick before we wrap up about groups. Remember when I told you earlier that 10 is a special group, especially in this particular distro? The reason why 10 is a special group in this distro is anybody who is associated with this group has what's called sudo privileges. So now you may be asking, well, what is sudo privileges and why should I care about that? Well, sudo stands for super user do. And essentially what you're doing in a nutshell is you're elevating your privileges in order to execute a command. When you are administering an OS, specifically a Linux system, it doesn't make sense to do everything in root because it becomes very, very hard to track who did what because there's only one root user. And so what we do is we go ahead and take a user like Elacosta. We put them in the wheel group as an example for this particular distro. And remember, you guys should know what a distro is because I've done a video on this in the past. Link is in the description for the playlist if you don't know what I'm talking about. But again, in this particular distro, when you're a part of the wheel group, that means that you are allowed to have super user permissions, or you can elevate your permissions and you can do all kinds of tasks that a regular user can't do. So let me show you an example here. If I were to go into our program and we call this program vi sudo, see how it says permission denied? Well, this is when you have regular user permissions. So because I know that Elacosta is added to the wheel group, or 10, I have super user permission by doing sudo vi sudo. And there you go, it elevated my permissions and it got me into a program. And this program basically is vi, and it is targeting our sudoers file. And what a sudoers file is basically a file that keeps track of who is allowed to have elevated access to your machine. So again, going back to that number 10 or the wheel group, so if we search for wheel, now I want you guys to pay special close attention to this particular aspect of that sudoers file. And it's interesting because we have two wheels, right? So this one is commented out, so we can ignore that. But this one here is not commented out. And what it tells us is that this particular group, which is wheel, right? This has the ability to run all commands as you see here. But the difference is with this one is this section doesn't require you to put in a password. So meaning I can elevate my privileges, and once I type in sudo, anybody who is part of this wheel group based off of this particular line in my sudoers file, they have access to elevate their privileges without putting in a password. And you actually saw that when I executed this. It didn't ask me for a password. Now, interestingly enough, right, what we can do to prove out that this sudoers files works, we can go to the beginning of the line and we can do insert and go put a comment here. And again, guys, you should already know how to use VI by now. We did tons of videos, so check out the playlist if you are lost. So let's exit out of insert here. Let's go and uncomment this guy here. And let's go ahead and write and quit. So now I made an adjustment that says, hey, anybody who's part of the wheel group, they have to put in a password now every time they want to elevate their privileges. So if I do the previous command, which is sudo vi sudo, interesting, it now asks me for my password. And again, guys, I'm going to edit the video so that way you don't see what my password is. So I type in my password, hit enter, and what do you know? We've elevated our privileges and we're back here in our sudoers file. And of course, we are able to elevate our privileges because as you saw, I am a part of the wheel group, and the wheel group, according to the sudoers file, has the ability to elevate their privileges. So I'm going to go back to my wheel group here. And of course, I don't want to put in the password, so I'm going to comment that guy out. And I'm going to uncomment this guy out and do a write and quit. So let's test again to make sure that that change took effect. Sudo vi sudo. And there you go. It went without asking me a password. Awesome. So let's quit out of this. And it tells us that we, of course, quit without making any changes. All right, cool. Now, up until this point, you learned all about users. You learned about groups. I'm telling you, it's really that easy. You also learned about the sudoers file in a nutshell. And that is pretty easy, I'm hoping, from what you saw. And we also went over a small little example that shows the importance of why we use groups and users in Linux. So the last part that I want to teach you now is how do you go ahead and manage users and groups. And this part is also very simple as well. So follow me here as we work through this. So the first thing that we're going to do is how do we manage users? So let's say we have a new person that joins our organization, and our organization is small, so we only have this one box to manage. And we just hired some new person, and this person is Alice, right? Her name is Alice. So what we can do is we need to give Alice access to this machine. We need to add Alice as a user. So what we can do is do sudo to elevate our privileges. And of course, remember, El Acosta is part of the wheel group, right? So wheel, according to this distro, has the ability to elevate their privileges. So sudo user add Alice. There you go. And just like that, Alice was added to the system. How do we know that? Well, let's go under less, go under the Etsy directory, password, and in here you should see Alice, and there she is all the way in the end. So Alice has a user ID of 1001, a group ID or a GID of 1001. Her home directory is /home/Alice, and her default shell is bin bash. So the other way that we can verify this as well is if we do ID space and the username, let's say Alice, you can see again that Alice has a user ID of 1001, a GID of 1001, which is user Alice, group Alice, right? That's what the UID and GID represents. And she's also part of a group called Alice. So now that you see that Alice was created, and as we discussed before, Alice has a UID of 1001. This is her username. She has a GID of 1001. She's part of the Alice group. And as you see here, the only group that she's a part of, and we talked about it already, is 1001, which is called Alice. Now, sadly, Alice doesn't have super user permission. And as we see here, El Acosta, my username, I am part of the El Acosta group, so that's 1000. And I am also a part of group 10 or the wheel group. So I have privileges to make the changes. And remember before when we showed VI sudo and we actually elevated our privileges in order to get there? Because Alice is not part of that group, Alice doesn't have the ability to do that. So let's go ahead and do SU for switch user, and let's go into Alice. And it's going to ask me for a password. And I just realized we never set Alice's password. So let's go ahead and do Control C in order to close out of that. Let's do sudo for sudo. So sudo passwd. And that is actually for the password command. And followed by the name of the user, which is Alice. And essentially what we're saying is we want to change Alice's password. We can say hello, bad password. Yeah, that's fine. All right, awesome. So we know now Alice's password because we changed it to hello. So let's do su Alice password is hello. Okay, excellent. So if we do a who am I, we can see that we are Alice. So now, in order to prove what we talked about before, where Alice doesn't have super user permissions like El Acosta does, we can do sudo vi sudo, and it's asking, of course, for our password, and it says here that, of course, we want to respect the privacy of others, think before you type, and of course, with great power comes great responsibility, assuming that Alice has sudo privileges. So let's do hello. And then you see here that Alice is not in the sudoers file. This incident will be reported. So this goes to show you how important it is to have groups. Because if Alice was part of the wheel group, she would be able to do this very command. All right, excellent. So let's exit out of here. We are now El Acosta again. So I just showed you how to create a user. You learned how to change their password. Let's go ahead and add a group. And the way you add a group or create a group is you use the group add command. So let's do sudo group add, and we'll call this group Rockstars. There we go, if I spell it correctly. The groups were in the /etc/group file, so let's verify that. So if I were to do ls /etc/group, and if I go all the way to the bottom, you can see that Rockstars was created and it has a GID of 1002. Now, if I were to do an ID on Alice, which shows me her group ID and her user ID and what group she's associated with, Alice is just in the group Alice. If I wanted to add her to the Rockstar group, then there is a command for that, of course. And the command is sudo in order to elevate our privileges. El Acosta has the ability to elevate privileges. User mod -a capital G. And we are going to now give it the name of the group. So that was Rockstars. So that is the group that we want to assign. Now we need the user, like who do we want to put into that Rockstar group? And of course that is Alice. Hit enter on this. Now if we were to do ID on Alice, we can see now that Alice is part of groups Alice for 1001, and she's also a part of the Rockstars group, which is 1002. And that's that easy, guys. You just learned how to create a group. You learned how to attach somebody to a group. Your job now is to go ahead and tell me, how do you remove a group? How do you remove a user from the system in case the person leaves? Leave me a comment in the comment section below, and I'm curious to see if you guys will get it. And by the way, if you have any questions on what you learned today, also leave me a comment in the comment section below. I love to get your questions, and we'll make another video if enough people have the same question. Welcome back, everyone. And up until this point, you've learned all there is to know about users and groups. And interestingly enough, it really wasn't that hard. A lot of people just see the CLI or the command line interface and they think Linux is difficult or the concepts are difficult. But in reality, when you break it down to its simplest form, you realize that it's very easy to understand. It's just ideas build on top of each other. And if you don't learn the basic foundations, then of course it starts to get difficult after the fact. So there's a lot of stuff that you learned here for today. So make sure you continue to practice. Remember, practice makes perfect. If you guys have any questions on what you learned, or you want to add something to the conversation, make sure you leave me a comment in the comments below. And if this video has helped you out, make sure you give me a like for the video, as it helps the channel grow. Plus also lets me know that you guys are enjoying my videos. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications so that way you're notified whenever we upload to the channel. And share the video with a family member or friend so that way they can also learn as well. So that'll do it for today's video. I have to go get ready now because I have a business meeting coming up and I do have to pack for that. But stay tuned to the channel, guys, as I'm still going to be working on more videos to help you guys along in your journey. So I'll see you all in the next one.